You guys can hear me, right?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yeah, a little quiet though, but
Yeah, you can get closer to your mic. I think we're live, so I don't know, my camera's glitchy as hell. So everyone, appreciate you being here. My name is Mario Nawfal. So I've got a few questions here focusing on the interoperability between the metaverses, or between metaverses. So I'm the CEO of NFT Technologies. We're a holding company or portfolio company planning to go to list on the stock exchange. I'll let the other speakers introduce themselves. I know Ori really well, and that will be the first time I meet Denise and Josh. So Ori, do you want to kick it off?
yeah, sure. I'm the founder and CEO of NFTrade. We're a multi-chain marketplace, soon to be cross-chain. Really connects well with the conversation we're going to have today. So yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. Denise, Josh?
I'll go first, I guess. My name is Josh Adler. I'm the CEO and founder of ConvrtX, the largest incubator in MENA and one of the top 5 globally. I also recently launched the largest entirely free and open source advisory platform for startups. A large range of people we work with are in the NFT, crypto, DeFi space.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Holtzer. Thanks so much for having me here today. I spent about a decade working at Morgan Stanley. I come from wealth management, so I worked with ultra high net worth individuals, foundations, qualified retirement plans, institutions, and family offices for over a decade. I'm now with an investment bank based in management called Chatsworth Securities, mostly focused in tech. I specialize in AI, blockchain technology, Metaverse, and data. Mostly in banking abilities. We work with a number of different clients. I'm also co-founder of a social platform.
So Denise, just quickly, sorry, Denise, we can't hear much of what you're saying. So Josh, do you wanna try muting Josh? Because I think there's echo on your end.
Is that better?
Just try muting, Josh. Just mute, like me and Ori are muted when we don't speak. Yeah. Oh, much better. Yeah. So there's a lot of feedback from your end, and we couldn't hear anything Denise is saying. So whenever you're not speaking, I could apply to all of us. Just mute your mic. But yeah, Denise. So we heard most of what you said. The last 5 seconds was bad, but I think the intro was pretty clear.
Great. And I guess the last part is I'm also a co-founder in a social platform called Crunchit, which is an app focused on esports, gaming, social media, and we simplify all your social media onto one platform, and we're live in the App Store.
Cool. So before we kick it off, I've got 3 questions that were given to me before we started, and then we'll just shoot the shits for the rest of it. But disclaimer. I think both of our companies, or one of my companies, I think both of them. So NFT Tech, the one I'm the co-founder and CEO of, and another company that I founded is now an incubator accelerator, invested in NFTrade, Ori Levi's company. So we're big supporters there and very bullish on this platform. So just a quick disclaimer. And that was by coincidence. Whoever organized this didn't plan this. But to kick it off, I've got the first question, guys. Technical difficulties for the retail market entering the metaverse. My obvious answer would be, if you know how to set up a wallet, the rest is relatively easy. Wallets are still a bit archaic, and there hasn't been much innovation there for a while now. So I would say like the wallet setup and then the onboarding of fiat into the Web3 money to then be able to use all these different metaverses and platforms and NFT platforms. It's probably the main difficulty, but I'd love to get your thoughts, guys. Like, what is the main hurdle, technical or otherwise, like educational, like understanding what the metaverse is? What would you say is the main hurdle for the retail market entering the space?
I guess I'll jump in there. Or go ahead.
No, I was just going to start with saying that, there's obviously some interoperability between blockchains today. And I think, people really need to put in a lot of effort and work, to stake coins in different chains and to bridge other chains and swap different tokens. And, it's really not for everyone. In my opinion, there's really no way to get a mass adoption of users, with it being this difficult. So I think that's one of the biggest problems we face, that the process really needs to be seamless as using the internet, and buying and selling products from websites. And I think, users don't really need to know the back-end functionality. So I think that's, what really needs to change. And, in the future, if these metaverses want to interoperate, all of these blockchains, and back-end processes should be not known to the user. So I think that's really what needs to change to make it a seamless process if we want to really reach the volumes of people that the internet reaches today.
Or you were jumping in?
Yeah, I think that the problem is even a lot broader, or like a lot. The first thing is the ability to keep your own keys, to keep your own private key, is something at the highest level that regular retail users are having problems to do. I have been in Bitcoin since 2012, so I've lost some of my keys, and I'm pretty technical. So this kind of is the main problem here. People are used to banks. People are used to being reliant on a centralized service that you can recover your password when you forgot it. This is not possible with crypto, and that's something that is at the top level of the problem. So yeah, setting up a wallet right now is not easy, but it's not as hard as it used to be. So people can just download the Chrome extension, and if they follow the steps, and this is, I mean, MetaMask has done a great job at helping this thing become a lot more popular, and I'm seeing a lot of people with no clue what they're doing actually being able to set up their wallets. We're seeing fiat on-ramp solutions on MetaMask, so users don't really have to go on some other exchange and buy their coins and then transfer them. They can just quickly click add funds. In most countries, I think this works. And so there are lots of solutions, and we're seeing them more and more, but I still think that a lot of users are going to lose their keys in the near future, especially new ones.
Yeah, and I think before we go to Josh, I think that's been you've been in crypto for a while as well, Ori, and that's been it was a hot topic back in 2016, 2017, if you remember. Everyone was talking about custody, and the solution doesn't have to be centralized parties offering custodial services. I think a lot of you can build custody on a protocol level. Have multi-sig wallets for recovery of private keys, for example. So I think we're going to see very innovative solutions to this. But I share that pain. Like, I'm horrible at keeping private keys, and if I'm horrible, imagine my father, my parents, or my grandparents. They're not going to sit there remembering a private key and saving it in a safe place. But yeah, Josh, did you have? Oh, Josh dropped out. But yeah, so we'll go to the next question till we get Josh. He dropped out earlier, so we might have the same issue here. Now we've got a whole bunch of blockchains. Some of them have different use cases. Others are battling for the same use case. What do you see moving forward? Josh is back. Josh, you there? Yeah, your audio's not working, man.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. So did you have any, before we move to the having different blockchains and then talk about interoperability, any other technical difficulties? We've talked about custodial services. Denise talked about more about the understanding of the space, adoption. I think for adoption, things need to be simple. I touched on education. People understand, the difference between open and closed metaverses, for example. Anything we missed or anything you want to add on these points?
I guess a large part that I'd personally say is I like to look at the metaverse as the real world's digital twin. And I think that's really the way that you have to look at it fundamentally at the end of the day. And it has to function the same. It has to work the same. And like Denise mentioned, as well as yourself, Mario, there's a lot of education that's needed, but at the same time, I think we're experiencing everything's still functioning in silos, right? Everything within the whole metaverse space, you have individual silos, and the growth of each silo is capped by how tall that silo is or how interoperable, I guess you could almost say, that silo is itself. And then not even that, but the education of how you can get from one silo to another in today's day and age is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And then carrying to that fact that Ori touched on is I guess, that wallet factor, right? Because if you're having different wallets that work on different chains, remembering all those different passwords, fundamentally, I can give you a great example. My father has I come from a family office background. We have very, very large holdings in the crypto space. He's lost more wallets than I'd like to admit, right? And with that being said, now adding interoperability, not knowing which chain your own cryptocurrency is on, I've had situations myself where I've converted from one chain to another and I didn't save the RPC in my MetaMask. And I just thought the money was gone. And this is the constant error and issue, that there's no real, in today's day and age, there's a central bank. There's a standard of money. Everything's based off the US dollar. Everything's, I guess, pegged to the US dollar. But at the same time, too, more so, you're sitting in a position in which where if you have a multi-currency bank, it's all on one bank account. It's all one statement that you get at the end of each month saying you have US dollar, Canadian dollar, GBP, and so on and so forth. But you're not getting statements with your crypto MetaMask wallets. You're not getting your recovery keys where you're able to call up at midnight MetaMask and say, hey, lost my key, about to buy an NFT, sorry. There's no support, right? They can't do much. And I think that education factor where it's almost like when you're driving, where it's your fault if you don't know. Too bad kind of situation. In the crypto world, that applies, but in the banking world in today's day and age, it just doesn't.
Just want to touch on one point and give a tip to everyone's listening about the point of losing coins. This has happened to me as well, especially when I staked some coins at some protocol and forgot about it. There are some pretty good tools today that cover a lot of protocols. One that I specifically like is DBank. Another one is Zapper, where you can connect your wallet and it will find your funds in multiple chains that the same wallet is connected to. I highly recommend testing that out. You might find funds that you didn't know you have. So just a small tip.
We still do it manually. Like we got a team that checks each chain manually, and we do it multiple. We get distributions of coins. I don't check my wallets. I can't manage the coins. So we get distributions of coins we've invested in. I've got a team that manually checks each one to see what's arrived. And like, hey, is this coins that popped up? And then if you don't understand MetaMask, you're like, I can't see it. No, you got to go add the coin into your MetaMask so you can then display it there. But I imagine this, like, I wish I could see, and I'm sure we can find them somewhere, discussions about the internet back in 1995. I think we could do a lot. We can relate a lot of the things we're complaining about now, educating people, trust and trusting that digital web, which is nothing, instead of speaking to someone on the phone from a bank, scams, etc. A lot of things we're talking about now, custody of passwords. Now we're using LastPass, etc. I don't know what else you guys use, but I remember the days where if you forgot your password, you're in trouble, and they were, you're hoping that the website has the forget password function built in the early days. So a lot of the issues we're talking about, that's another way of saying that this is pretty normal. I think in any nascent industry we'll have similar issues. And I think that another topic we'll touch on later on is interoperability, which I think for an open metaverse to exist, or what I like to call the multiverse, interoperability is key. That's the whole concept of the purpose of having different metaverses instead of being in different silos. But I kind of move on to the next point from there, and I'll kind of divert from the questions I have prepared from you guys. How would you define the metaverse? Because there's so many definitions out there. I've got my own definition. I'll speak about it in events, and I've said it many times. But we can kick it off with Denise. Denise, how would you define? Let's say try in 1 or 2 sentences. How would you define the metaverse?
Yeah, I think the metaverse is really a network of 3D virtual worlds, some kind of way to connect everything in a social atmosphere.
Ori, how would you define it?
Yeah, I think everyone sees Metaverse differently. I think the difference between Metaverse and World of Warcraft or Sims is the actual, as Denise mentioned, the social factor is stronger and the financial factor is implemented. So people are actually going to work in the Metaverse, going to make money in the Metaverse. That, I think, is the main differentiator from virtual worlds that we've known for years.
Josh?
I think I'd probably say the metaverse is a world that's a digital representation of the real world in its closest form, but at the same time, too, allowing for a form of expression that's never been done before. And that's the unique factor. On social media, and I'm going to expand, sorry, here. Social media, you can post what you want. You can make yourself come off to be what you want. In the world of other platforms on social media, like TikTok and all that kind of stuff, you can come off as a funny person. You can come off as a curious person, someone that's very, very factually intelligent. But the metaverse is a physical representation, but in a virtual sense, still, of what's possible, if you get what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, so my definition is similar to yours, Josh. That's why I'm like, I did this because I thought you've heard me before. So my definition is the metaverse or the multiverse. I use the word multiverse. If anyone hears me say it, it's like a conglomerate of all metaverses will exist in an ecosystem, which we'll talk about later, what I call the multiverse. But the metaverse is a digital representation of the world we live in today, which is what you said, Josh. And that encompasses what Ori and Denise said. Without predetermined physics. I always add that in because if I jump off this balcony, that's the last time you see me. But if I do that in the metaverse, you could teleport, you could fly, you could, breathe fire, imagination is the boundary. But I'll go to the next question that we have. And that's, I was touching on that earlier before you jumped on, Josh. You got all these different blockchains. What do you see happening as the space matures? Will there be a king that we all use, similar to in Web 2.0, there's certain protocols that we all use, TCP, IP, etc. Will there be like one protocol we use for everyone to build their own metaverse? And just to be clear, anyone can build a metaverse. It could be closed, it could be open. It's just a virtual representation of the world. So will there be one protocol that we all use, or will there be multiple protocols and they'll be interoperable?
So I think to touch on that, we went away from the gold standard a while ago. As I'm sure everyone knows here in this call, I would hope. It's the gold standard no longer exists. Regardless of country you go to, regardless where you are in the world, gold standard isn't there anymore. They now say the US dollar is US dollar. I don't know if you know this, but in the past year alone, 40% of all US dollar was printed, which is crazy to imagine. And as well, last year alone, 70% of all crypto owners came just last year. So it goes to show, but the point that I'm trying to get at a more nuanced space level here is the factor that with crypto, I think the unique factor to it is I don't think there ever will be a standard because it's owned by the people, because it's created by the people, because it's controlled by the people. Humans are emotional. If you look at the stock market, the S&P over the last week, dropped a few points almost every single day, then rebounded right back to what it was. And the stock market's the best definition in the financial sense of emotions, if you get what I'm trying to say. With that being said, I think that we'll consistently jump from one to another in the same way that we jump from one phone to another every few years once the next one comes out. And I think that's the amazing part to the metaverse itself. Will I think there will be a leader in a sense? Yes, but I think that leader will change every few years, like presidents.
So are you referring to metaverses? Because there'll be millions of metaverses, or are you referring to like the underlying protocol that we use to build those metaverses?
I'm relating more so to the currencies that will be used. I thought that was your question, I guess.
Okay, to the currencies. Cool. Now, I agree with that observation. Ori, you want to jump in there?
I understood your question.
Josh, do you want to mute? Yeah, perfect. Thanks, man. Go ahead, Ori.
Yeah, so I understood your question, and it's a really great question that I haven't really thought about deeply. Just now, when you kind of asked it, I think the answer is no. The reason is there is such a big mess in this whole new wave of companies that I don't think anyone's waiting for any protocol to come out. And so everyone's building without a standard. And this is why if a standard protocol will be available, it's going to take at least 10 years from now, in my opinion.
I was chatting to my team about this before this. So I'm like, I told my team, I want to ask this question. What do you think? And then we came to the same observation. We're like, it's difficult to say whether there'll be one standard protocol that we all end up using to build our metaverses. And I'm talking about a decentralized protocol and not like a metaverse, like what Meta's building. There'll be multiple metaverses. And if there will be one, it's probably not here. and it'll probably be here in 10 years' time. It's hard to imagine one of the existing protocols being to innovate enough to get there. But maybe they will. Maybe with the adoption they have, they could. But Denise, I'll move to you. To same question, but instead of focusing on protocols, metaverses. So everyone's worried about Facebook's or Meta's metaverse. I forgot what they're calling it. And, being a dominant metaverse that everyone will end up using. I'm more leaning towards, they're just going to have their own metaverse. People could use it, but they could jump to any other metaverse, including decentralized ones, centralized ones. There'll be multiple ones over time. How do you see the space evolving? Do you think they'll be centralized and there'll be big players like Apple, Facebook, and other large organizations that will dominate the space? Or do you think open metaverses that are owned by the community using the metaverse will end up being king?
Yeah, no, great question. And I would start with, I agree with some of the points that Ori brought up. I think the most important thing to think about that we haven't discussed yet is how Fortune 500 companies, are going to react to this. Like, do they, how quick are they going to be to put their data on someone else's blockchain? And I think that's something, we haven't really discussed or thought about. I mean, over the last 4 years, I've been working with a number of companies in the data space. I believe we're going to start to see metaverse in the box type products for large scale enterprise that will live actually in the cloud, not on a blockchain, not on separate blockchains, so that companies can control their data and all their customers. So I think that's something we haven't really seen yet that could evolve. I think we're in the very, very early stages, very, very similar to what happened in the early .com days in the late 90s and early 2000s, when early tech companies raised tons of money off ideas with no concrete business to show for it. And then there was a massive crash and a bubble burst in 2001. I think we're seeing a similar trend emerge. History, really doesn't often repeat exactly, but it often rhymes. And I do think there's a lot in this space that hasn't happened yet. I do think, big, companies are going to want to own their communities of users and be able to sell products and NFTs in their own metaverse, right? Potentially that links to their website. So we haven't seen that sort of emerge yet, but I've started to see companies that are doing that. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh. No, who was speaking? No one. But yeah, I was going to say, Ori, I want to touch on what Denise said. Do you remember the days of the, I think that goes to everyone. Remember the days of the closed blockchains, open versus closed blockchains? And it had R3 and all them. And then that kind of just disappeared. No one's talking about it now. We may go through a similar phase with metaverses. Closed metaverses are all the hype. Every company wants to own their metaverse. But I'm not seeing it, to be honest. Like, Mark talked about the metaverse having a lot of aspects of it being open and decentralized. I know that the founder of one of the top gaming studios, not Blizzard, I can't remember which one it was, that said the same thing, that there will not be, that no company can own the metaverse. And I think some of them understand that they have to accept decentralization. But before we go to Tali's audience question, I have a question for Ori. Denise touched on the hype and being similar to what happened in 01. You raised capital and did really well during that hype, and we were investing during that hype as well, where we saw all these projects, and a lot of them were just, initially they were throwing the term NFTs. Everyone wanted to have an NFT in their whatever project they're doing. And then it became Metaverse. I have a tweet that says, everyone wants to try to squeeze in Metaverse into their white paper to raise money, similar to what they did back in 2017, 2018, adding blockchain to their white paper, to their press release. How do you see the space, man? Like, do you see a bubble forming? Do you see a lot of these projects going to zero? Or do you think a bubble hasn't even started?
Well, it depends on what bubble we're talking about. If we're talking about the collections bubble, it's definitely about to explode. And this is something that's going to go away very, very soon. We're already seeing most of them disappearing or becoming less relevant. But me having a BAYC in my profile picture means that some of them are here to stay. And I truly believe that there are going to be a lot of those that remain popular and valuable for the future. But I think it's time to stop releasing 5,000 collections per day. I think that the market's is had enough with it. But if we're talking about NFTs and adding NFTs to existing technologies and implementing, we saw, I think it was Hyundai a couple of days ago released their new car is going to have an NFT in it. And everyone was like, what? What do you mean an NFT in it? But it's actually pretty cool where you can store the data of whatever happened to the car. If you went to the garage and all that on a smart contract in a decentralized manner that no one can interfere with, and I think that's a cool idea. Maybe they're using it as a buzzword. They could have used a different technology, but I guess putting it on an NFT and on the blockchain is kind of cool. So I think NFTs are going to be used for a lot of things that we still haven't even thought about. So to answer the question, no, the bubble is not going to burst very soon. I think that there's a lot more possibilities, and we're going to see so many more companies. We're talking to a lot of big brands, as Denise has mentioned, that are looking into building and moving into NFTs. So definitely there's going to be a lot more coming and big things. But at the same time, you don't have to buy every single monkey that comes out. That's
yeah, you're the monkey guy, I'm the punk. I did a speech a while ago about the punks and monkeys. I've got my crypto punk in my profile pic, and even though I'm bullish on apes long term, I never thought they'd blow up as much as they did. Now, I'm still surprised how far, like, the crypto market corrected along with Bitcoin and stuff a few weeks ago. That's a lot of projects collapsed with like 80, 90, 95%, which is, doesn't surprise you if you've been in the space for a while. But then NFTs, that volume keeps getting higher and higher, and that money is just flowing into NFTs. I know it's irrelevant, but it's just been an interesting observation. So I'll go, Josh, I want to ask you a question, man, about the adoption phase. Now, you touched on it earlier, is that there'll be an adoption curve, like any new technology. And I always like to use the example, the human brain tends to overestimate the short-term impact of innovation and underestimate that long-term potential. So referring to the long-term potential, where do you see the applications of the metaverse kick off? Because, if you go on decentralized sandbox, number of users is abysmal. There's no one there, but you're still, companies are jumping on just so they can mention it to their investors that they're using those, they're ahead of the curve. But in terms of real applications, I'm guessing going to go towards gaming, or do you have a different take towards it?
So I'm actually going to take an entirely different take. I'm going to take the remote work concept, which is probably, I guess, the most unique take from my perspective. I think where everyone imagines remote work to be today, it will be entirely reimagined from every single perspective possible that you could possibly imagine, where it would actually make more sense to be in the metaverse working than it would in the physical world. Because we're going to a world where a lot of countries are even in lockdown still. Like, home for me is Canada, Toronto to be exact. And they're sitting with a massive truckers protest right now where everyone's still staying at home. And from a mental perspective, why even bother traveling if you could just jump into the metaverse and interact with one of your colleagues hands-on, sit in the exact same office with your augmented reality glasses and get to work. But with that also being said, I think the biggest adoption issue from my perspective that will come and will kind of change as time goes on is kind of touching on even the point that you guys were talking about before about whether this is a bubble or not. I think that the whole NFT thing, as it's looked at right now, is entirely a bubble, and is literally about to burst. Not in a year, I think a little bit longer than that it's going to run for. But the reason why I say it's going to burst, and I'll provide a direct example just to give you guys an understanding. I bought NFTs a few times on Binance before. And I don't know if you guys have ever done this or experienced this before, but most of the NFTs that are on Binance are isolated most times just to Binance. They're not on OpenSea. They're just on the Binance NFT network. And the biggest issue with that is it's a much smaller market. And interoperability from that perspective is limited just to the Binance users when the crypto market is much larger than Binance as a whole. So what ends up happening is the access and the use cases, if it was something that could be used in the metaverse, would be far more restricted, where, let's say, for example, if you own an Apple NFT on an Apple NFT database or of sorts of network, you would be limited to use that just within Apple. So the reason, or the point I'm trying to get at more or less, is everything is isolated in a sense in different networks or in different ways or sorts of forms. And with, I guess, the Bored Ape Yacht Club and with CryptoPunks and all that kind of fun stuff and all these different new NFTs that are coming out even as well, all of them are very, very isolated. And the reason why I think there will be a bubble kind of pop in a sense will be more or less the factor of these NFTs won't be able to be used in the metaverse space. They won't have that possibility where you can become an ape, because I just don't think it will happen, to be honest with you. I think that there'll be more usable NFTs, for example, homes, for example, microwaves, for example, couches, where they're designer couches, Roche Bouboir couches that people are paying thousands of dollars for to have within the metaverse. And those will be things that will hold real value because they're actually usable. If I told you, for example, I'm going to give you a plaque that's worth $1 million, you're probably going to say, really? If you look at the art market, there's still people buying expensive art, Pablo, or Picasso art, or any of that kind of stuff. But it's not as big of a market as it once was in history, if you get what I'm trying to say. And I think the same thing will happen with NFTs, because I don't think it will be transferable. I don't think people will care as much about having a Bored Ape on their wall. I just don't think they will.
Yeah, but so I want to agree and disagree at the same time. I want to, it's just mute because I can hear myself double, Josh. Sorry, man. Perfect. So I want to agree because, yeah, I think what we're investing in, NFT tech, utility NFTs. So things, and that could be something like a gun in a game, or it could be land in a certain metaverse that will, the metaverse has actual utility. I've had metaverses come up, hey, people can run meetings in our metaverse. I'm like, yeah, that's just Zoom. Zoom will build their own one. It's centralized, it's easy. When there's a metaverse that's based on like a game where there's mechanics to it, when there's actual utility and there's a community building around it, it makes it more interesting. But what I want to say disagree. I don't like to use the word, but I want to comment on so CryptoPunk, for example, or Bored Ape, because you guys are killing it. Putting that on your wall is not that interesting. But the access you get, and I'll let Ori comment on this, and then I'll go to Denise. I've got another interesting question for Denise right after that. But Ori will probably comment on this. It's beyond just that. Like, Bored Apes are leading the way in building a lot of things for their users. So owning a Bored Ape gives you access to the community, access to metaverse, access to events they run. Plus, it's a nice flex. And there's even though I don't wear Rolexes and shit, there's value in doing that. When I'm in a meeting with a client who's wearing a Rolex, I'm like, or driving a Lamborghini, he's like, or Rolls Royce, doesn't guarantee he's successful, but at least it adds a few points to like maybe more likely he is to be successful. So there's value in signaling, so there's value in that, and there's other forms of access you get from joining a community. I don't know if Ori, you have more points to add on this before I go to Denise.
No, definitely. I think the community aspect is the most important here. And I think that at the same point you made with Rolex, I've actually seen people sporting Apple Watch with their Bored Ape showing, this is the new Rolex kind of thing. And but also you actually get a lot of perks by being a Bored Ape, not only in your own Bored Ape community, but if you usually get access to a lot of other projects because they want these people to be in their communities. And so, for example, whitelists and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have actual time to go on and grind those whitelists because actually I would have made a lot of money from it. But I know some people do, and that's a cool thing too. And yeah, events, really sharing information between the community inside the Bored Ape community. Lots of cool stuff. Yeah.
So Denise, I want to go to you with a quick question. What was the question I wanted to ask? Okay. So I think I remember the question. Now, what do you think are the short-term applications of the metaverse? What do you see? What in 5 years' time? How will people actually be using the metaverse other than speculating on which metaverse will succeed and trying to make money?
Yeah, great question. I I think just to circle back to what we were talking about, the dot-com bubble burst in 2001, to kind of tell you how I see it, is that, back then, not everyone believed, in the future people would be shopping for products on websites. They still believed people would want to go to physical stores, and that was part of the bubble burst. People talked about, they thought this was crazy. People wouldn't go to websites to actually buy products. But today, 20 years later, especially now with COVID, we know there was a lot of truth in that hype, and that, now everybody buys things, on the internet, either through a website or on an app. And the dot-com burst just consolidated everything. It was a time when everything needed consolidation. So it was sort of, 2.0 was the move from shopping in stores to shopping on websites. And, the dot-com burst was really the consolidation and the tweaking that was needed until the winners like Amazon and eBay took stage. And then, over the last 20 years, companies like Etsy and RealReal, Shopify emerged to really take the forefront. So now 20 years later, we do most of our shopping online. I think 3.0, which is the next phase, is really shopping in a virtual world, right? So it's going from a website into a virtual world where companies, can really move to the next phase. And I believe the metaverse will have a similar trajectory. I think that goes back to really where companies are going to want to make the experience, back to your question that you started with, that, companies that are in the space, the winners will be the ones that make it more interoperable. Those are the ones that are going to win and make it easy for the mass market to adopt and be able to enter this world. I think it's very difficult right now for an average person who hasn't been in the crypto space to sort of enter it, right? Because it's difficult. I think, Ori brought up a number of reasons why, and so did Josh, why it's difficult for the average person to enter into the metaverse. I think from a company perspective, they're focused on customers, right? And how to sell products, right? And I think what the metaverse will do, it will actually lower costs by moving the shopping experience and the community and the social interaction of their fans and fan engagement into a metaverse, where they can launch and sell physical products instead of in physical locations that cost them money. And they can also give access to clubs and rooms that give them access to things. And then, you can sell NFTs of those products or, tickets to things. So I think that's where you'll really see large adoption, and it's obviously already starting to happen.
Yeah, so someone unmuted? No. Okay, so I wanted to just comment on 2 points you made, my thoughts on it. And I see, Ori, you're unmuted. I knew it. Yeah, so I'll make my comments and I'll take your perspective on it too. But yeah, so I think that the similarity between, you mentioned 2001, which is an example that we all use for really most bubbles now. I think that was more similar, and I'd love to get your thoughts, guys, more similar to 2017, because back in 2001, I got a message from Tally. We have 5 minutes left, so we'll probably touch on this and we'll probably close it. But back in 2001, you mentioned something interesting, Denise, that people thought the internet was a fad. I think the days of thinking blockchain was a fad was 2017. Remember the days like, hey, this is all a fad, Bitcoin is going to zero. We don't see those comments anymore these days. So I think now, which I think we are in a bubble, it's a different bubble. There could be a shorter correction, not a bit long bear market. Just because the days of thinking, I speak to a lot of institutional guys, are like, institutional investors are like looking for bargains now, where in 2017, they're like, yeah, this fad is dying. So I wanted to comment on that. And then the other point you made is about adoption. I think running events and stuff, and I think, okay, short-term adoption of the metaverse will be things linking it to the physical world. Okay, having a meeting in the metaverse, like Mark said, instead of here. Obviously, games is an easy one to do. And then long-term, where the metaverse will be very different. It will be like a whole life. Ready Player One, the beginning of it, is a good example of that. We can literally do everything from getting married to meeting someone, to socializing, to flexing, to having a fight, to playing a game, to building a business, running events, etc. So like again, digital representation of the physical world. But Ori, your thoughts on this, and then Josh, and then probably Denise, and close it off.
No, actually, all I wanted to say on top of what Denise said is just like she mentioned, physical goods. What's cool is that I think almost any physical good you're going to buy in the metaverse is going to be accompanied by an NFT that you can sport in your on your avatar. So you're buying 2 in 1.
So I think the point that I'll touch on quickly is I think the things that you already do on a computer or on Web 2.0 will be the first things that transition to the metaverse itself. That includes, like Mario said, Zoom calls, online shopping, all that kind of fun stuff, as well as possibly looking at real estate as well. I think that will be the next transition post video games. I think you'll be doing virtual viewings where a home, 3D models created of that home, you do a tour of it, and then you just buy it online and you go see it in person and move in. I think that will be the next wave that's coming. But I think until we gain enough traction where basically the metaverse looks like Battlefield 4 or either that, or it looks realistic enough that it looks like the real world, I think adoption is going to be very, very challenging. And I think until that comes, we're not going to transition to where you're putting 80% of your money in the metaverse, 80% of your time in the metaverse. I don't think that's going to happen until that's the case, if that makes sense.
Denise, any final thoughts? I wanted, before that, Ori, I wanted to mention what Ori, you said, how every physical item will have an NFT with it. Yeah, so we're invested in a company called Faith Tribe, sick company. And this is the same concept where they're democratizing fashion for the physical world, where you buy a piece of clothing and they can have that same piece of clothing within the metaverse. So Denise, any final thoughts on this? And then you can wrap up, Denise, with where they can find you. And then Ori and Josh, you could do the same and we can finish it off.
Sure. I think one last thing to think about is that everyone on this call, we've all been in this space for some time. So we have a lot of inside insight and have watched things develop. And I think the average person has not. So adoption is going to take a lot longer than you think. And I think it's the same thing with the internet. It took, 10 years till people actually really adopted it and started online shopping. But I think we are still in the very early days. I think the future will be the metaverse. I think it's clear that 3.0 is where we're going. Everything, I agree completely with what Josh said about everything eventually, meetings, classes from universities. I think shopping, all of that will eventually move into the metaverse, but we're still, in such the early days. If you look at a lot of the companies, they really haven't built it out yet, right? So we're still in very early days of this. I think we will move into it, but it might take still 10 years till people are actually doing it, until the mass market really learns how to do it. And the large companies in the space make it really seamless and easy as entering the internet. And I think right now there's a lot of hurdles to get there. So I think that's why it's hard to really see who the winners are going to be, because just like in the .com days, things changed very, very fast over 10 years, right? Nobody envisioned iPhones and touch screens.
I could imagine where we're at now. Same way we can't imagine where the metaverse will be in 10 years. And just I'm getting message from Tali to wrap it up. So Denise, where, like in 10 seconds, where can they contact you, Ori, Josh, the same way, and know more about what you're doing in the space or your respective companies?
You can go to Chatsworth Securities. You can Google me on the internet and find me that way.
Cool. So that's Chatsworth Securities. I Googled you already before the call, so I know about you. Ori, NFTrade, please Google him. We're believers in what he's doing. So where Google you, nftrade.com?
Yeah, nftrade.com. You can find us, our Twitter. You can follow me, but it's pretty boring to follow me. Better follow what we're doing at the company. Really excited about this whole new thing we're all getting into.
Cool. And Josh, about ConvrtX, 10 seconds, where can they learn more about you and ConvrtX?
Definitely. I have articles all the time on the internet you guys can check out. Just search up my name, and then for my company, it's convrtx.com, or the new platform I launched for startups, openadvisor.app.
Open Advisory, the app, Open Advisor,
Open
the app.
Advisor, Open Advisor.
Open Advisor, the app. All right, cool. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. And everyone listening, enjoy your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Mario.
Everyone.
How do I end this now?